We are of one mind with one thing, that the best education is received in those institutions that combine teaching and research at the highest level. There are institutions that focus exclusively on teaching, and of course the liberal arts colleges like Swarthmore and Amherst in the United States, higher education institutions in the United Kingdom. These are teaching-only institutions. They are fine institutions. They have their role to play in the higher education ecosystem. But I believe that there is no experience better for the young mind that is able to benefit from it. There is no experience better than being taught by someone who themselves is leading a field of inquiry, who themselves is rewriting the rules of physics or French literature, who themselves is pushing back the frontiers of knowledge. To be taught by that person is a privilege, and it is an experience that leaves an indelible mark on a young mind. And I feel strongly that institutions like the Max Planck Institutes in Germany, that are research-only institutions, they too have their place to play. But they lose something very important by not being connected to the teaching of undergraduates, the forming of young minds. Point number 3 is, yes, we must be committed to the highest level of research, but we must also be committed to a high-quality education. And that's a tough balance. It's a balance that all great universities, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, we struggle with, because very often leading researchers get completely absorbed in their science or their literature scholarship, and finding that time to commit to teaching can sometimes be a challenge. But the great researchers, I invariably have found, make great teachers. And Oxford has a very strong emphasis on teaching. It has a unique method of teaching. I believe it is the best and the most effective method of teaching in the world. It is very different from the method in Harvard and Yale. It is based on a very personalized engagement of teachers with their students, professors and tutors with their students. It's called the Oxford Tutorial. It is a distinctive method of teaching where students spend 1 or sometimes 2 hours a week, one-on-one, occasionally one-on-two, with their professors. And it is an experience where they have to read an essay they've recently written. They have to go through a problem set if they're in engineering. Imagine this experience, one-on-one, in the office of the professor or the tutor. And it's an experience where there is nowhere to hide for the student. And I can tell you, it can be quite anxiety-inducing for the students. And one of the great things about an Oxford education is you see these 18-year-old students quaking with fear in their tutorials, that they are being probed. And, well, what's the basis of that argument? What evidence do you have for saying that in your essay? And you can imagine the student is very nervous and fearful. But what does it do? It really forces the student to prepare. It forces the student to motivate themselves to study, to learn for themselves. It develops in the students an intellectual self-confidence that I believe is absolutely essential in higher education. This is not secondary education, this is higher education. And self-motivation, independent thinking, is a vital part of what I believe a world-class higher education should be. And I talked about the quaking 18-year-old. One of the great things to observe in Oxford is the 21-year-old who starts to argue back with his professor, who says, no, I disagree with you, there's another way of looking at that problem, or no, I think you're wrong with your mechanism of a chemical reaction. And there is nothing better in Oxford than to watch the intellectual development of a student as they develop that kind of self-confidence. So that is the third point. It is the education, and it brings me very naturally to my fourth point. And why are we committed to the Oxford tutorial? Because it is the best in the world. It also happens to be the most expensive form of education that you could possibly imagine. One-on-one, one-on-two, you can imagine it. And of course, what does that bring us to? My last point, finances. I have to confess to you that British higher education is in the most uncertain time of its funding than it has been since the Second World War. We have obviously a British economy that is in considerable distress. We have massive political uncertainty. As was mentioned by Ben, what time is it in London now? So I think the polls have just opened. And as Ben said, you know, there is great excitement but massive uncertainty, because as many of you know, we are likely to end up with no government at all. We are likely to end up with a hung parliament. It is possible that by Friday morning, Oxford will have its 26th Prime Minister, but what is clear, whoever is the Prime Minister is going to be dealing with serious financial problems. Those financial problems almost certainly will lead to cuts in the education budget, to the higher education budget. At the moment in the UK, there is a root and branch review of the funding of higher education going on. It's chaired by Lord Brown, former CEO of BP, and that will report back in the autumn, and he will look, I hope, very much at a long-term sustainable model for the funding of higher education in the UK. But I won't pretend it's not worrying. I won't pretend that we in Oxford are concerned about the future. One of the ways we are tackling it, and one of the reasons I am in Hong Kong and have been visiting China, of course, is philanthropy. Of course, is to engage our friends, our alumni, foundations, benefactors, and to provide a level of funding through gifts. And Oxford has just, 4 years ago, I shouldn't say just, 4 years ago, we started a campaign to raise $1.25 billion pounds, excuse me, and certainly not Hong Kong dollars, 1.25 billion pounds. And I am delighted to say that we have now passed 850 million towards that goal. And to us, that's not just a sign and an importance of the money, albeit important. It is, for us, a vote of confidence from our friends, from our alumni, from foundations, including wonderfully generous foundations and individuals in Hong Kong. It's a vote of confidence in Oxford, that Oxford is a world-class university that delivers a world-class education, and that the world wants it to continue. It may be located in Great Britain, but in fact, Oxford University is a university of the world, and it is a university for the world. Thank you very much.